Hey,
Oh, Helios.
hey you! You're going to catch your death out here if you keep wandering around in the rain like that. Couldn't find a tent in time? No problem. Come on over here, rookie. We've got room for one more. Pull up that stool there and warm yourself up, rookie.
You might want to pull off that sopping wet cloak. Wouldn't want you to die before the operation starts.
Sheep means a cold. Wouldn't want to catch a cold and be put out of commission before the big day, you know? There you go. All better, huh? Yep. A warm fire is good for the bones. My feet are killing me, and this mud and damp haven't exactly made our march thus far any easier, you know? I'm starving, too. I could barely contain myself when they started handing out rations. Was the bread all gone by the time you got your stew? Want one of ours? Morgan and I have an extra if you'd like to have it. Oh, shoot. What did she say her name was again?
You didn't ask.
Oh, right. Sorry. How rude of me. My name is Frederick. Spearman, 1st Vanguard Group. And this here, as I'm sure you can guess, is my closest companion in the entire order, Morgan. She's an arbalist from the 4th Rearguard Squadron. Oh, I know. You don't have friends, huh, Morgan? Well, if that's the case, then why have you and I always been inseparable since our recruit days?
Dear Helios, Frederick, don't make me regret sharing a tent with you. I like you, Frederick, but I still will punch you in the face.
She loves me. Anyway, what is your name, recruit? Oh, cool. Did you grow up around here, or... Oh, okay. I've been through there before, but not for a long, long time. Beautiful place. Well, it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Sorry that I didn't ask your name right away. My father would be rolling in his grave if he knew how bad my manners had gotten. I tend to, talk a lot sometimes.
More like all the time.
Sometimes, all the time, yes, thank you, Morgan. Anyway, if you don't mind me asking, what's your story? Come on, you know, your story. Well, nobody up and just joins the Order of Dawn for fun, you know? I mean, we get it, right? We are the ones who enter the dark, that we may bring forth the cleansing light of Helios, and drive back the wicked into the shadow of the world. We are the ones who enter the night, that we may bring order with the dawn, aeternum in aurora, blah, 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 blah. We all know the creed, but what about... Huh? Wait. Who is Helios?
More like, what is Helios? Helios is the name of the sun. You know, that big, bright ball of fire in the sky. Just as Selene is the name of the moon. They're the old world names, so it's not surprising you didn't know, considering when you joined the Order.
Oh, that's right. Morgan and I saw you at the initiation ceremony. You joined literally right before we were set to hold our largest operation to date. Good thing you graduated ahead of your class in record time, huh? Practically the entire Order mobilized for this mission, including the leader of the Order himself, for the first time ever. Talk about lucky. Ooh, you may even get to meet one of the Zahnsterns. That would be awesome. Morgan and I have never even met one before. One time, I saw one back at headquarters coming out of the top secret archives of the Twilight Library. I think it was Vega, but I couldn't get a good enough look at her to tell
All right, fanboys, settle down.
What? I'm not a fanboy.
What I think Frederick is trying to say is you haven't had time to study your solar scriptures yet, have you? All right, kid. History time. If you die at the end of this week, at least you won't die a complete idiot. When the two primordial gods, Theia and Hyperion, who were deeply in love with each other, finished creating the world, they descended to Eden and became the sun, which the first people named Helios, and the moon, which they named Selene. so that they could spend eternity together and bathe their creation in their silver and golden light.
Ooh, this story never gets old.
When Helios and Selene descended to Eden, Selene betrayed Helios. Frederick, why are you gasping? You know this story already. I know you do. We were in the same Luminous Studies class together when we were recruited.
Yeah, but it's still a riveting story. It really makes you feel sad for Helios, you know?
Yeah, sure. Anyway, when Helios and Selene descended to Eden, Selene grew jealous. She didn't want to share the sky with her love, so she hid from him on the other side of the world to rule her own half of the sky. So vain was the moon that she plunged the sky into darkness so that her light would be the only one visible, aside from the stars, creating the first night. The problem is, where darkness goes, foul creatures will always follow. Shadows and nightmares took shape in this darkness, and the various abominations we call night terrors were born.
Ooh, I think I just got the chills.
Helios felt bad for his creations. He never wanted them to live in fear and darkness, so he began his eternal pursuit, forever chasing his once true love across the sky in order to drive back the darkness and its horrors every morning. Now you know what Helios is, rookie, and why the Order of Dawn exists. To kill the monsters of the night before they can kill us.
I feel so bad for the sun. How could the moon do that to him? They loved each other.
Ugh, Frederick, come on. You do this every time I tell it.
You just have such a way with words, Morgan. Anyway, now you know, rookie. So, of course, we're all here to slay monsters and protect humanity from the shadows. But like I said before, everybody's got a reason for being here. Nobody just signs up for the Order on a whim because they feel like it. So, come on, spill it. What's your story? Ah, you want us to go first, huh? Well, I guess that's only fair. I'm here for revenge. Yup, simple as that. I just want to find the baddie that did me wrong and cut his head off or shish kebab him or something. I don't know. But that's pretty much it for me. Morgan?
Nope, If you're going to make me tell my sub-story to some wide-eyed greenhorn, then you've got to tell yours first. You made this bed, now it's time you get to lay in it.
Oh, I don't think that's necessary.
Them's the rules.
I guess that's only fair. I did ask after all.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, well, I'm not as good of a storyteller as Morgan is, so don't complain if you don't like it. Oh man, where to begin? Okay, so my father was a tailor, and when I was just a boy, I began to apprentice under him. I wasn't very good at it, of course. I was clumsy, I hated needles, still do, and I couldn't cut a straight line of fabric to save my life. My father's work had been growing more and more popular, so we traveled a lot to keep up with the demand. I never knew my mother. She passed away bringing me into this world, so it was always just the two of us. Despite being members of the lower class, we spent a lot of time around nobles, although I doubt they hardly ever noticed I was even there. My father crafted beautiful garments for nobility all over this continent, using some of the finest linens, wools, and silk he could get his hands on. Despite this, though, they never treated us like we were anything more than dirt. But I guess it pays to know whose rich butts to kiss if you want to move up in life, huh? Anyway, my dad made a decent life for us. We always had enough food on the table, 2 beautiful wagons, one for living in and one for working in, and my clothes never had too many holes in them. One day, my father received a letter from some Count LaRouge, who resided all the way over on the jagged coast. He claimed that he had been admiring my father's work for some time, and that word of his quality clothing had made it all the way over to his lands on the coast. He requested that my father craft him an entire wardrobe of the most exquisite outfits ever made from the most luxurious blue and gold silks money could buy. It was ambitious, sure, but the Count promised to pay us enough gold that I'd be able to retire at 13. I was 9 at the time. So we set to work. We met the deadline of only 2 months by only a single day and set off eastward, post-haste, after sending the Count word. The storms on the jagged coast are brutal, but it wouldn't be the storms that would stop us. It would be the bandits. Brigands, cut purses, and defectors from the war had set up an ambush, hoping to rob anyone fool enough to be taking the cliff roads at night in the pouring rain. A stupid time to travel, I know, but we had a deadline to meet and a mountain of gold to collect. When they rolled boulders into the road and surrounded us at sword point, I knew it was over. They threw me into the mud where I conked my forehead on a rock. That's how I got the scar on my eyebrow here. See? Then they beat my father when he tried to fight back after they found the priceless clothes we had made for a wealthy patron in our wagon. They bound and gagged us before walking us back to their little camp. I don't know how long we trekked, but when we finally arrived, my feet were screaming and caked in mud and the rain had stopped, allowing the full moon to finally poke out from the clouds. I don't know what they had planned to do with us, but after we were thrown into cages, I heard one of them joking to his buddy that they were going to sell off all the clothes they didn't want, then sell my father and I into slavery. That was it, I thought. I'd probably never see my dad again, and I'd live out the rest of my days wiping some semi-rich dudes behind for table scraps. I had just about consigned myself to our fate after I'd finished crying my eyes out for a few hours when something unexpected happened. 2 of the bandits dropped dead. A pale blur moved swiftly between them in the moonlight, almost dancing as it painted the camp crimson. It was a man, or it looked like one, and he was moving almost too quickly for the eye to see. He was practically ethereal as he laid waste to the bandit camp, using the tips of his fingers like blades as he sliced the panicking men to ribbons. A few of the hapless criminals unsheathed what crude weapons they had in an attempt to defend themselves, but none of them even got a chance to swing before they were lying in sanguine puddles. When it was finally over, the man turned to my father and I. "Well, that was unpleasant," he said as he took out a dainty white handkerchief to clean off his bloodied hands. This man had the sharp features and porcelain skin endemic to someone of privileged birth, and was dressed in all the finery of a nobleman, although I'd never seen a noble do that before. He introduced himself and exclaimed that he was in fact the Count LaRouge, who had hired us 2 months ago. He said that he was elated when he'd received our word that we were on our way with his new wardrobe, but when we hadn't arrived on time, he feared the worst and decided to come looking for us. When he came upon a cart filled with some of the finest garments he'd ever seen, all in shades of blue and gold, well, he knew he'd found us. I was so relieved. He immediately set upon letting my father out of his cage with a key he had nicked off one of the bandits during the carnage. We were saved. Or so I thought.
That was
Before he thrust his hand through my father's ribcage. "You see, you've witnessed something you really shouldn't have tonight," he mused. "This is just as inconvenient for me as it is for you, I assure you. I was hoping we could do more business, but I didn't become Count by allowing loose ends to scurry around unchecked." He tossed my father from his arm as though he were a used-up old coat he didn't want anymore, and approached my cage. As he unlocked it, I cowered in fear at this thing that loomed over me like death itself in the moonlight, while my father choked to death on his own blood behind him. "Don't be afraid. I'm going to give you the choice I never had," he cooed, his lips curling into a smirk to reveal 3 sets of razor-tipped canines, too large to be human. "After all, who's going to believe some grimy street urchin's fevered ravings of a monster parading around as a man? Go and live, or stay here and die. The choice is yours." With that, he turned on his heels to leave, stepping over my father, his eyes now empty and devoid of life. He made it exactly 8 steps before he stopped and said over his shoulder, "Oh, and this is for the clothes. Fine work your father did. Pity," before tossing a single gold coin into the mud. And then what? Well, obviously I chose to live. I snatched up that gold coin and made my way down the cliffs as best as I could. Nearly slipped and fell to my death a couple of times, but after 4 days I finally arrived at the nearest town, starving and half dead. I was too young to work and too old to bribe people with puppy dog eyes, so I lived on the streets as a beggar and a thief, stealing food from the dock markets and fighting back alley rats and dogs for garbage. Eventually, I stole from the wrong person, He was a member of the Order, a muscular man with salt and pepper hair and a gnarly scar that made his beard look funny, who was passing through the small harbor town that lined the base of the cliffs of the jagged coast. After he caught me, he shook me for all the silver I'd stolen from him when he came upon that same gold coin the Count had given me. He asked why I'd stolen his silver if I already had a gold coin. He probably assumed that I'd stolen it from somebody else, but I told him the truth, and that I kept it to remind me of why I'm alive. To remind myself that I am alive. Of course, the mention of a vampire masquerading as a count caught his attention. He must have seen something in me because he offered me an alternative to pickpocketing and living on the streets like a gutter rat. So he gave me a medallion, which had the words Aeternum in Aurora engraved over a sunrise on one side and a map made of the horizon and the stars on the other. Told me there was a place full of people who'd all at some point witnessed and been changed by the horrors that lurk in the night, just like me. Said that if I wanted to take the fight to the darkness for once, that he'd be waiting for me to give him his medallion back. So, I followed the cryptic as hell map on the back of it, and now here I am.
You still have the coin, right?
Yep, got it right here. You see this, recruit? No matter how hungry I was, no matter how cold or miserable I was, I never, ever spent this coin. I keep it on me at all times, and when I find that Count LaRouge and finally run him through with my spear and watch the life drain from his cold, unfeeling red eyes like the animal he is, I'll give it back to him as a token that I made my choice and that I never forgot. Anywho, sorry if that got kind of heavy there, rookie. But now you know. That's how I joined the Order. When I joined, I was placed in training with a group of initiates that Morgan was already in. She'd been recruited a couple of years before I became old enough for training, and was the top of her group, of course. All right, Morgan. Fair is fair. Your turn. And you're much better of a storyteller than me.
Fine, but only because I know you won't shut up until I do.
Atta girl, that's the spirit.
Alright, listen up, rookie, because I'm only telling it once, and I'm skipping the details that aren't important, whether you wanted to hear them or not. Deal? Good. Alright, so I grew up on a small farm with my mom, dad, grandma, and younger sister. We had a dog, stray cats, cattle, chickens, pigs, a turkey, the works. And we made our living growing potatoes and wheat. We lived kind of out in the middle of nowhere, in the golden fields south of the Pine Drift Woods, so my family and I were all really close, and each of us pulled our weight on the farm, including my grandma. Despite the blood and sweat of farm life, our days were always peaceful and uneventful. I liked it that way. Hell, I loved it. After I'd finished my morning chores, I'd often wander off to play with the stray cats that kept the mice away, play chase and fetch with our dog Benji, climb trees, nap in the hayloft of the barn, or pick flowers for my little sister to turn into her famous flower crowns. One day, something out of the ordinary happened. It was just before noon, and my father would be returning home soon from dropping off our fall harvest at our merchant in the nearest town. It had taken him a whole 5 days to travel all the way there and back. That wasn't out of the ordinary. Town was pretty far away after all, and we only had one horse to pull our cart. No, what was strange was what my father saw on his way back home on the 4th day. That morning, my mom had tasked me with cleaning up the garden and replacing the wood posts we used to hold up the tomato plants, while she and my little sister cleaned up after breakfast. Huh? What was my little sister's name? Hey, what did I tell you about unnecessary details?
Yeah, please, Morgan.
Ugh. Alright, fine. Her name was Elizabeth. Beth for short. Anyway, while Beth was inside helping my mom clean up, I was outside in the garden. I was laboring over a wood post that I had been desperately trying in vain to get to stand up straight so that I could drape a tomato plant over it when I heard the familiar rattle of our cart coming up the south road. Excitedly, I quickly shoved the post into the ground and threw the tomato over it before running out and around the garden to go greet my father. I used to be a bit of a daddy's girl. Unfortunately, in my haste, I tripped over the rake I'd been using to clean up the dead leaves and snapped it in half as I fell straight onto my face. Great, I thought as my eyes welled up with embarrassment and my cheeks turned an angry red. My dad had just arrived back home, and now, because of my clumsiness, he'd have to scold me for breaking our good rake in my haste. Instead, he pulled the cart up right next to me, knelt down, and immediately helped me up, asking if I was okay the entire time. I was fine, of course. Children are invincible up into the age of 18, but that was just the man my father was. He didn't care that I'd broken the rake. He didn't care that he'd have to fix it later today after riding for over 4 days straight. All he cared about was whether or not I was okay. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. Once he knew I was fine, he propped up the broken rake against the fence and led the cart around, before taking me inside. My father told us how his trip to and from town went. Told us that he'd sold off our entire harvest, down to the smallest grain of wheat, and that he bought my sister and I some new dolls to celebrate. After that, he showed us off to go play with our new toys so that he could talk to my mother. Of course, you know how nosy kids are. I decided to hide on the stairs so I could eavesdrop. I remember my dad telling my mother and grandmother how unsettled he was by something he saw on the road back home. He said he'd discovered a wagon, much like ours, lying off the side of the road, its horses dead and its owner missing. He described it like nothing he'd ever seen. The cargo was strewn along the road, suggesting that it wasn't bandits, or else the cart would have been picked clean. Demi-humans never ventured this far north, and the claw marks along the cart and the horses were much too large to be wolves or mountain cats. He figured it was probably a bear, woken up early from its hibernation. But bears weren't particularly known to attack people on the road, even a tired and hungry one. He decided it'd be best that my sister and I didn't go out at night for a while, and that we keep the dog inside.
Yeah, you know what, Morgan? We don't have to keep going. Let's just call it a night and let the new recruit go settle down.
No, it's fine. I'm fine. Anyways, later that evening, as my mother and grandmother were preparing dinner, I caught my sister calling out for the dog from the front door, her hands on her hips in frustration. I asked her, "What are you doing? Benji's in the house, isn't he?" "No," she said. "Listen." I leaned out the door and put my hand to my ear. Sure enough, I heard Benji's obnoxious baying in the distance. I remember thinking how weird that was, because I had sworn that I had seen him lounging on the rug in the living room all day after my dad had called him in around lunchtime. But this wouldn't have been the first time he had snuck out from inside the house, so I pushed it aside. "I'll just run out and grab him real quick. He's probably out there chasing the rabbits that sneak into the wheat fields again. You know how he gets," my sister told me with a shrug of her shoulders. Before she could leave the porch, I reached out to stop her. "Beth, wait. Papa said that we weren't supposed to go out after dark. Let's just go ask him to get the dog." "No," she proclaimed as she tugged away from me. "Papa's helping Mama and Grandma make dinner in the kitchen, and I don't want to bother him." "You mean trying to help," I joked. My dad couldn't boil water to save his life. Most of my dad's helping involved forgetting to peel carrots and potatoes before putting them in the food, and insisting that cutting onions didn't make him cry while he bawled like a baby. "You know what I mean," my little sister snorted. "Besides, I don't want to be the one blamed for Benji getting out again," she pouted. "But weren't you actually the one who let Benji out last time anyway?" I asked, raising my eyebrow at her. "He was getting bored inside and wanted to play in the rain," Beth shrieked defensively. "Anyways, this is my redemption arc. Please, Morgan? Come on. You know I'm a fast runner. I'll be really quick. And besides, Papa said not to go out after dark. But it's not dark yet. See? Only sunset. I have plenty of time. Plus, I have my lucky flower crown." There was nothing lucky about this flower crown, nor was there about any of her other ones either. I had watched her make that one earlier that morning out of the brightest yellow dandelion flowers she could find while I was slaving away in the garden doing chores like she should have been. She made new ones every time her old ones wilted, because she insisted that the fairies would bring her luck as long as she wore them. Lucky flower crown aside, though, she had a point. Beth was really quick on her feet, and it was still light outside. it wouldn't be dark for another half an hour or so. All right, I finally relented. 10 minutes and no more. If you're not back by then, I'm getting Papa. Got it?
Got it.
She chirped as she practically leapt from the front porch and took off towards the field where Benji still howled incessantly. I waited there at the front door and enjoyed the beautiful golden rays of the sunset in the meantime, admiring the way the sun left a gentle golden halo along the horizon, which painted the fluffy clouds pink like spun sugar against an indigo sky. The sunset always looked best from our front porch. I could just sit there and get lost in those pink and orange hues and those big billowy clouds. There was just something magical about it, and I can't quite place my finger on. Never mind. After a couple minutes, I heard the barking stop. I was relieved. Maybe Beth was right. She'd be back with Benji in tow. We'd wipe the dirt off his paws and her bare feet to hide the evidence, and Papa would be none the wiser. So I waited. And I waited. And I waited. But Beth never came back. I gave her 10 extra minutes. Then 20. Thinking that at any minute she'd come racing back from the field with Benji flinging spit around behind her as his massive jowls flapped while he ran. When my mom finally found me, waiting at the front porch, dusk had almost completely given way to night. "What's wrong, sweetie?" "Come inside. It's time for supper. Go grab Beth and wash up," my mom had said. I'm not too proud to admit that I was a nervous wreck by this point. "Mom, Elizabeth hasn't come back yet. She left to go bring Benji back from the wheat field. He was barking so much, and I let her go. She said she'd be right back. She said, and I..." My mom stopped me there. "Braun?" she called out for my dad. Within minutes, my mother and father each had their lanterns and bows. "We'll be right back, okay, Sweet Pea? You stay here and watch after Grandma," my dad had told me with a reassuring kiss on the forehead. I wasn't in tears by then, but my eyes still stung like I was on the verge of them. My parents took off at a sprint for the wheat field that Beth had snuck off to nearly 40 minutes ago now. My grandmother did her best to reassure me as I watched their lantern's light disappear into the distance, until Benji came bounding up beside me from inside the house, barking at all the excitement. My eyes went wide. Benji? How could this be? I swore that I'd heard him howling from the wheat field. Could Beth have come back home and entered in through the back porch? No, that was impossible. My parents would have seen her come in. A hard lump formed in my throat as the sense that something was very wrong washed over me. "Gran, I'll be right back, okay?" I quickly told her. My grandma protested, of course, but I barely heard it because I was already out the door, barefoot, and had a full sprint towards the fields. The waist-high wheat brushed past me with a coarse whooshing sound as I ran. Something wasn't right. If Benji wasn't making all that bang, then what was? I had to warn my parents. I had to warn them that they were in danger. By the time I'd arrived at where I'd last seen their lantern light, my chest was heaving and I was drenched in sweat, despite the cool night air. The stars were out now, and I looked around frantically for any sign of my parents. "Papa?" I called out. "Mama? Papa?" I saw rustling to my left, about 30 feet away, and ran to it. "Mama! Papa! I have to tell you something! The barking wasn't coming from Benji! There's something out here that..." But before I could finish, something tackled me hard to the ground. It was my mother. "Mom? Mom, what are you..." She clamped her hand over my mouth hard to stop me. "Shh," she told me with her finger to her mouth. She rolled us both onto our bellies and pulled me close to her as we hid within the wheat, pressed against the cold ground. My mother was breathing heavily, her eyes wide, and a thick layer of sweat coated her face and her trembling hands. She was pale with fear and gritted her teeth as she watched something ahead of us. I had never seen my mother like this before, and I remembered just how much that seeing her this way scared me. There's something visceral about watching your parents experience true terror, you know?
Yeah.
Well, when I followed her gaze, I was made intimately aware of what my mother was so scared of. Arching over, roughly 15 feet away, was a large, black mass. Thick muscles rippled under its coarse fur, like a boar's, and uneven bony spines, silhouetted by the moonlight, protruded from its back, rotten viscera hanging off of them. It had the hump and build of a grizzly bear, but it was larger than any bear I'd ever seen, with too many limbs, which looked like that of a wolf along with its tail. None of that was the worst part of it, though. The worst part was the smell, heavy in the air, and sickeningly sweet. Very good, rookie. The smell of decay. My stomach overturned as its stench invaded my nostrils. I watched the creature with my mother. A wet crunching sound came from where its head was jerking up and down, and I became aware that my mother was slowly inching us backwards, careful to avoid rustling the wheat with her legs. You need to run. Run home, put Grandma on the cart, and ride away from here as fast as you can. She breathed against my ear. I remember being so confused. What was this thing? Where was Papa? Had he found Beth? And had they already gotten away? Why did we have to leave home? Surely Mama could kill this thing with her bow, right? After all, I'd seen her and Papa take down wolves and even mountain lions with their bows before. I received my answer to all of these questions when I looked back up at the creature. As it lunged down and let out another wet squish, I saw my father's face, his lifeless eyes wide and his mouth frozen in a silent scream as this creature, this monster, ate him. My blood ran cold, and I felt my hands immediately clam up as I understood now the source of my mother's dread. Stay low. I don't think you can see very well. Turn around and crawl on your belly back to the house, my mom whispered. What about you? I asked. What about Beth? It's fine, sweetie. I'll be right behind you, and then we can go look for Beth together, okay? Now go. Go, my mother ordered as she lifted her arms from around me, and I pulled myself up on my hands and knees. I turned and began to crawl away, careful not to push myself up any higher than the tops of the wheat. Sweat stung my eyes, making it hard for me to see, and if it weren't for that one little problem, then I would have been able to see the post of that damned scarecrow in front of me, instead of crawling headlong into it. It let out a low, rustling sound, followed by a heavy crunch as it fell over, spilling dried hay everywhere. The creature stood up and howled, a deep, guttural wail like something between a wolf and an elk, and I watched in horror as it charged at me. I stood immediately to run, but it never got the chance to chase me as my mother sprang up and yelled for its attention. Hey! Over here! She cried. It stopped on its heels and turned, its interest entirely on her now. She raised her bow, but I don't think she ever got a shot off. Her final words to me were, Morgan! Run! So I did. I ignored the tears in my eyes, stinging in my feet as I trampled down dry wheat, and the screaming of my mother as she died. I didn't stop until I made it back home. The horse was nowhere to be seen, probably scared off by that thing. So I ran inside and led my grandma and Benji down into the cellar. I couldn't stay, though. I still had to find Beth. What if she was out there still, hiding, just like I had been with Mama, waiting for somebody to find her before that thing did? So I snuck out the back door, and there I found probably the only reason I'd survived besides dumb luck. That broken rake. The head of the rake had snapped off where I'd tripped over it earlier, leaving a jagged wooden point. Not sharp, but sharp enough. I quietly made my way back around to the front of the house, using the chicken coop as cover. And to my horror, there was the creature. It was pushing around the old tin bucket that my mother had left as decoration on the front porch. That was the first time I'd gotten to see the monster's face. It had very little flesh on it. Little more than a skull which looked more like a deer's than a bear's or a wolf. It had small, malformed antlers, and its bottom jaw was like a gross amalgamation of several animal jaws all mashed into a mess of teeth and bone. Oh no, I thought to myself. I couldn't let it get inside the house, or else it might find Gran and the dog. So I made what was obstinately a very, very stupid decision. It clearly couldn't see very well, and, judging by how it reacted when I knocked over the scarecrow and when my mother yelled at it, it probably operated mostly on sound. So, I tiptoed to the wooden fence and started slamming the rake handle against the wood. "Hey!" I shouted. "Hey! Over here! Look over here!" As soon as the monster whipped its head up to face me, I was already hopping the fence and running towards the road on the other side of the farm. The monster let out a hungry howl as it gave chase. I had to lead it away from the house. I thought that if I could do that, then maybe, just maybe, I could give it the slip and circle back around to find Beth. I don't know how long I ran for, but eventually I made it to the road where I finally stopped for air. The howling and the guttural snarling of the beast had ceased, and the trees had given way to the rolling golden fields that surrounded the dirt path. My lungs burned, and I gulped the cold night air for breath. I remember something standing out to me then as I was slumped over the broken shaft of the rake. A flower crown, made of small, yellow dandelion flowers. I recognized this, I huffed to myself as I picked it up. It was Beth's lucky flower crown, and it was barely held together at this point. The flowers already shedded their petals like amber snowflakes. But what was she doing all the way out here? She had to be close by, but I was too afraid to call out, so I looked around until I found footprints. Sure enough, I did. They were small and barefoot, just like Beth was, and they were zigzagged messily down the road before veering off into the field up ahead. I put the flower crown on my head for safekeeping, and I followed the trail, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Beth, I'm so glad I found you, I hissed as I made my way into the dry grass. We have to get out of here. There's something here, but it only reacts to sound, so if we just keep low and stay quiet, I think we could sneak back home and get... I said earlier that I'm fine, rookie. I'm almost done. If a person like Frederick could tell his sob story without crying, then I damn sure can too.
What? Hey!
Anyway, before I could finish my sentence, I came upon Beth for the first time since I let her leave the front porch that evening. She was lying on her back, and most of her upper body was in shadow, obscuring what little remained of her shredded dress. A large puddle of blood had dyed the dry grass around her dark ruby, and she was deathly still, like a discarded doll lying in the dirt. It felt as though all of the air had been sucked out of my lungs, and I dropped the broken rake and fell to my knees, as the last ounce of strength I had left finally abandoned me. My body felt numb, but I remember how hot my tears were as they poured down my face. After that, I just couldn't hold it in anymore. I didn't care about being quiet. I didn't care about running. I didn't care about anything anymore. I cried until I was screaming, until my throat felt like it would bleed, and my already aching lungs would burst. Why was this happening to me? I thought. This wasn't fair. What did I do to deserve all of this? What did Beth do to deserve this? I blamed myself, of course. Still do. I was the one who let her go that day. If I had told her no, insisted that we follow Papa's rules, and just waited until morning, then she'd still be alive today. Or maybe it's pointless. Wendigos are very high-level night terrors with usually one or two random keen senses. With this one's incredible sense of hearing, it's very likely that, with it stalking our farm that night, it would have made it to our house regardless and killed us all anyway. I don't know. Regardless, I was interrupted from my wailing by a sudden sound. Morgan! Morgan, sweetheart! My mother's voice cooed. I was frozen then as goosebumps exploded across my skin. Mama? I thought. No, it couldn't be. I heard her. Morgan? Beth, where are you? The voice cooed again. I slowly turned to look at the source, and my heart practically stopped as I made eye contact with the Wendigo. Huh? How did it mimic my mother's voice?
Oh, I got this one, if I may, Morgan.
It's fine.
Okay, so there are 5
And
classifications
you're
of
already
night
going.
terrors: creature, corpse, phantasm, abomination, and vampire. Wendigo fall into the category of abominations, which means that they're capable of altering their form to some degree. In the case of Wendigos, they're an extremely rare type of night terror that add whatever they consume to their grotesque, ever-changing bodies. One of the ways they lure their prey is by mimicking the things they hear, often to unnerving accuracy.
Exactly. It all came together for me then. The overturned cart, the claw marks, bear attacks, the sound of Benji barking in the field. It was all this thing's fault. It called out for me more with my parents' voices as it slowly ambled in my general direction, its head moving side to side as it listened for a response. It hadn't noticed me yet. I still have time to run. I can still make it to safety, I thought, as I held my breath and quietly began to stand up. Then it spoke again. Morgan? Morgan, I'm scared. It spoke in my sister's voice. You see, as Frederick said, Wendigos can only mimic the things that they hear. Morgan? Mama? Papa? Please, help me. Any thought of running left me then as a white-hot rage bubbled up from my stomach and flooded my limbs. These were my little sister's last words. She must have been terrified as this monster chased her all the way out here, just as it had done to me before killing her. How dare it speak with her voice? I knelt back down to pick up the broken rake handle, my knuckles turning white from the pressure of my grip. Hey! I growled as I gripped the broken handle like a spear. Immediately, the monster turned its ugly head to face me, its eyes locking with mine as blood dribbled out of its open jaws. I'll never forget those eyes. See, Rookie, all night terrors, from grave slimes to even the oldest vampires, share 2 things in common. The first is an aversion to sunlight. Some night terrors can withstand it better than the others, while some burn up and die the minute it touches them. But every night terror experiences some kind of intense weakening effect in direct sunlight. This is why most night terrors only come out after dark. The second thing these monsters all share is their eye color. Every single night terror, no matter their type, power level, age, or intelligence, every single one of them has those same red eyes. And I mean red, red. Red like you'd never seen red before. I'll never forget the deep crimson of that Wendigo's eyes, 2 hateful, hungry orbs floating inside of its deer skull head. Before I had had a chance to prepare, it lunged at me. I did the best I could to jump out of the way, but the fatigue from all the running I had done had started to catch up with me and settle in my arms and legs. The monster caught the side of my leg, at the thigh, with 2 of its claws. I dropped the sharpened rake handle and tumbled to the ground in pain, scrambling to put distance between us on my hands and knees. My hand found a large rock, and I spun quickly onto my butt as I whipped the rock across the monster's face like this! Part of its cheekbone splintered, but the monster barely paid it any mind. Instead, it took another step forward and pressed one of its massive front paws to my chest, pinning me to the ground. Another settled on the top of my right leg, and I heard a loud crack as it rested its full weight on me. I screamed in agony as the pain, the likes of which I had never felt before, lanced up my leg. The Wendigo loomed over me, its jaws wide and my eyes watered both from the pain and the sheer stench of it that close. My arms scrambled for anything, another rock to hit it with, some grass, a dry reed to pull myself free, anything, until I found something. It was the broken rake handle. I stretched, my fingers wrestling for purchase. The Wendigo reared up, its many mouths opening wide, spilling black blood onto my chest and face, and right as it lunged down for the kill, I found my grip and thrust the makeshift wooden spear up into its throat. The monster let out a gurgling squeak, kind of like a cross between a whimper and a choking sound as it seized. I held the rake tight and closed my eyes as the sound and struggling intensified. I could feel the handle quivering as something warm covered my hands and arms, and suddenly it stopped. And there was a loud thump as the rake handle was pulled free from my hands. When I opened my eyes, the Wendigo lay dead beside me. It was covered in blood, both its own and mine. I couldn't feel or move my right leg anymore. I was also rapidly becoming very, very tired, and as a strange sense of calmness began to overtake me, I became acutely aware at that point that I was going to die. With all my might, I rolled onto my belly and crawled towards my sister. I don't remember crying, but I could feel the tears rolling down my face as I took her hand in mine. I told her that I was sorry. That I was sorry I was unable to save her. That I was sorry that Mom and Dad were gone. And that I was sorry for all the fear and confusion Grandma and Benji would feel when none of us returned come morning. For the sadness they'd feel when they found us. After I was done, I laid my head down on the edge of my sister's dress, unable to hold back the exhaustion any longer. Before I passed out, I felt a cold autumn breeze blow over me, sending ripples across the flaxen fields on either side of the road, and lifting Beth's lucky flower crown up and off my head, carrying it high into the sky. That was fine, I thought. I wouldn't need it anymore. I watched the golden petals scatter in the wind before my lids crept closed, and I surrendered to the blackness. When I awoke, it was not in heaven, but on the ground, where I'd fallen asleep. It was dawn now, and the dark navy sky with little white stars had given way to the golden clouds and soft pale blue of dawn. There were people talking around me. One man and two women, it sounded like. I couldn't make out what they were saying. It was as if my ears were full of water. I didn't have the strength to lift my head, and it was so cold. Finally, I felt a pair of hands on me, and I was rolled onto my back. "Why, Helios, she's still alive," I heard one of them say. "Quickly, tourniquet her wounds," one of the women shouted. "What about her leg?" the man asked. I could barely make out his face. My vision was so blurry, but I could tell that it looked like he was about to throw up as he knelt beside me. "We can't move her like this. We'll have to amputate it here. Vera, check for any other survivors. Arnold, get the saw," a woman with a gentle voice ordered. The man began to protest. "But I've never done one before, and certainly not in the field. I wouldn't..." "Well, you're going to learn today. Now do it," the gentle-voiced woman cut him off. I didn't really know what was going on at that point. Who were these people? What did they want? Was I already dead? The woman with the soft voice put some kind of bag down and knelt beside me. "Hi there," she said. "What's your name?" Morgan, I croaked. My mouth was so dry and my throat felt like it was made out of broken glass. "Morgan. That's a very pretty name. My name's Elvie, but you can just call me Ellie for short. All right?" I nodded. "Arnold, don't look at me. You're doing fine," the nice lady whispered before she turned her attention back to me. She had wavy blondish white hair that fell around her shoulders like clouds, and her eyes reminded me of my mom's. "Morgan, you're a very brave girl. Do you know that? It looks like you beat a big scary monster all by yourself. I'm very proud of you. Can you tell me how old you are?" the woman asked. As you can imagine, I wasn't really in any kind of mood to talk. Every word came out of my throat like gravel, and all I wanted to do was sleep. I turned my head to look over at Arnold, who was on my right. He had a white apron on now, with a white piece of cloth tied tightly around his mouth. He kept wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his arm, and he looked like he was trying his best not to puke. Whatever it was he was doing, it sure was making a racket, like a wet sawing sound. "Morgan," the blonde woman repeated as she gently turned my head back towards hers. "How old are you, honey?" 15, I barely managed. 15? Oh, wow. And you defeated that big monster all by yourself. You're quite the capable young lady, Morgan. My friends and I came all the way out here because we heard of the amazing job you did. I'm so happy we found you." She praised me. Of course, she didn't come all the way out there for me, but I didn't know that at the time, and I didn't need to know. "My friends and I are part of a secret club that takes care of problems like these, and we're going to take you with us from now on, so that we can get you all fixed up, okay?" she said, and I became aware of the fact that I was being lifted up as Arnold and Vera put me onto the back of a small cart. "Where are your mommy and daddy? Are they in that farmhouse way down the road?" Ellie asked. I shook my head, and if I had any more tears left at the time, I might have started crying again, but I was much too tired for that now. "Grandma, there, Mama, Papa, dead." At that, the kind woman's smile finally faltered. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. But don't you worry. We'll make sure we tell your grandma that you're all right, okay?" I raised my hand up, trying desperately to reach for Beth, who still lay there on the ground, the grass blown over and covering her face now. Sister," I wheezed. Ellie took my hand in hers then. Her hands were incredibly soft and very warm. But despite that, I could still feel the subtle calluses of hard work on her palms and fingertips. "Your sister would be very proud that you lived and that you didn't give up. I know that it's hard, but somebody once told me that the dead don't get a second chance, but that they could give them to those still living. If it weren't for this," and I watched as she held up the remains of Beth's lucky flower crown and the trail of flowers and stems that it left behind on the road that led straight to you, "we may not have found you in time." I reached out and took the crown, holding it close as the waves of emotion welled up in my chest and throat. "You know, the secret club that I'm in is made up of a bunch of very special people. People who are special like you," Ellie explained. She took a golden medallion with a rising sun embossed on it out from underneath her uniform and placed it on my chest, inside of the flower crown. "I'm a field medic, and a pretty high-ranking one at that. And, though I can't speak for everyone, I say that we'd be very happy to have you, if you are interested," she said. "But we'll talk later. I'm going to give you some medicine now to help you rest, alright? When you wake up, you'll be in a nice soft bed by a warm fire, and you'll feel a whole lot better, okay? Then, we can talk if you want." After that, I remember waking up in a hospital bed at one of the Order of Dawn's outposts. I explained to them what happened that night, and they told me who they were and what they do. They told me how, if it weren't for my quick thinking, my grandma and our dog would have probably died. And they told me how I'd lost my leg at the thigh in the fight with the Wendigo. That's how I got this. See? Yep, it's a full prosthetic, from the upper thigh down, made of a lightweight alloy. I can't feel it, but it moves well enough that I'm able to run and jump and climb as well as anyone else. It's also pretty durable and runs on gears and a few pistons.
Classic Morgan. Even her prosthetic leg is cool. She even has a hollow compartment in it that holds a knife that pops open in emergencies.
Yes, thank you, Frederick. Frederick likes the leg knife.
The leg knife is the freaking coolest!
Well, yeah, of course I joined, without even giving it a second thought. After what I'd gone through that night, there was no way I could go back to my old life. That life was gone now. Stolen from me that night by that thing. Now, I serve as a member of the rear guard, picking off targets at range with my arbalist before they even get the chance to think about causing any harm. Although, my reasons for being here admittedly aren't as altruistic as the kind field medic who saved me that day, or as laser-focused as Frederick's. I fight against the forces of the night because I hate them. Plain and simple. I hate every single thing about them. From their ugly, snarling faces to their cowardly night stalking, to the awful noises they make and the cold, unending hunger to consume everything good in this world that burns in each of their dead, red eyes. I hate everything about every one of them, and I won't stop fighting until I die, or until the day that I wipe the very last night terror off the face of Eden. Be they Shadowhound, Grave Eater, Wendigo, or Vampire.
Well said, Morgan. Although, rumor has it that one of our targets has goldish eyes. So that's pretty neat, huh?
Sure, Frederick. Whatever you say. You're a really good listener, Rookie. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I think I could get used to you hanging around with Frederick and me. Anyways, we've held up our end of the deal, so now it's your turn. So, what brought you to the Order of
Lights
Dawn?
out, everyone. Breakfast will be at dawn. We marched 0700 hours.
Well, you heard Commander Arturius. Time to hit the hay, Rookie.
So cool.
We'll talk in the morning. In the meantime, you can bunk with Frederick and me in our tent. We have enough room. Unless you'd prefer to die from hypothermia out here.
All right. Welcome to the tent, new roomie. Hey, in the morning, we'll find out where you'll be deployed and get you some chow, too. And then I want to hear all about how you passed basic training in record time.
Frederick, stop bothering me, Rookie. I don't care if you think she's some prodigy or something. You're not gonna get her autograph.
Well, I wasn't, but that's not... we can talk autographs later, okay? All right, lay out your bedroll and get some rest, Rookie. We have a busy day tomorrow. In the morning, we make our final march to that Castle Volgenheim to begin Operation Daybreak. I'm just going to make sure the fire's out, and then I'll join you and Morgan inside. Sleep tight, Rookie.